very happy to be here today. I'm Nagwa Lashin from UN Habitat's Regional Office for Arab States. Welcome, everyone, to the side event addressing policy coherence and finance gaps in the pursuit of SDG localization and multi-level governance. I look forward today to a very rich discussion. We have a very distinguished panel. But before we begin, I'd like to announce that we're taking this opportunity to launch the Multi-Level Governance for Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, or MLG for SDGs initiative. It's an initiative that hopes to prioritize multi-level governance in discussions and in practical endeavors to advance the implementation of the SDGs at all levels and in all regions. It specifically draws upon UN Habitat-led research on multi-level governance for SDG localization and the ongoing support provided to national and local governments worldwide. Ultimately, the initiative also aims to assist UN resident coordinators and UN country teams, as well as the wider development community, to better align development support at both the national and the local levels. Last year, we convened during the ECOSOC Partnership Forum to discuss the topic of multi-level governance for SDG localization, following the launch of our inaugural global research on the topic. However, this year, our objective is to delve deeper into the tangible implications of multi-level governance. How can we genuinely achieve it? Adjustments are necessary, and so on. Today's session aims to initiate a series of discussions with a specific focus today on policy coherence and finance, two very crucial topics in this context of multi-level governance. Joining us today for the discussion are, and please forgive me if I pronounce any of the names wrong, Alexandre Amado, officer in the multidisciplinary monitoring team of Plan APP, Competence Center for Planning, Policy and Foresight in Public Administration from Portugal. Cristina Matus, Director of National Planning and Budget from the Ministry of Economy and Finance, Mozambique. Puvendra Akia, Senior Manager for Policy in eThekwini, South Africa. Julio Sagir, Secretary of Public Management and Planning, Province of Tucumán from Argentina. Amalinda Savirani, Professor of Political Science and Head of the Department of Politics and Government at Gadjah Mada University from Indonesia. And last but not least, Sami Putonen, Business Advisor, Education Tampere, Business Tampere from Finland. Welcome all of you. It's great to have people from all over the world. We will start the session with a keynote speech by Daniel Platz, Senior Economic Officer, Financing for Sustainable Development Office's International Tax and Development Cooperation Branch from UNDESA. Daniel, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Nagwa. I hope you can hear me okay. Okay, I see you nodding. Great. So thank you again for inviting me to this very important and interesting side event organized by our colleagues at UN Habitat, but also from DSDG. I'd like to focus on three broader questions today, mostly from the financing angle. The first one is why is financing SDG localization key, and how are global, national, and local governance questions interlinked here? The second one is what can be done globally to strengthen SDG localization finance? Sorry for that awkward long term. And third, what can be done nationally and locally to strengthen SDG finance? So the first question is probably an easier one to answer, because we all know that SDG business is local business. At least 65% of SDG targets are directly linked to the work and mandates of local and regional governments. Secondly, there's something that is often underemphasized, and that really speaks to the link between national and local governments, which is that national government financing challenges are really local government financing challenges, because local governments get their budget to a large degree from national governments. Even in the most advanced lending countries, countries with biggest municipal bond market is by far the US, 20% of local government budgets still come from public funds. You go to the developing world, that is usually much larger than 50%. Sometimes we've seen it in our work as high as 80 or 90%. So strengthening national finance will go a long way in strengthening local government finance, and that is something we cannot forget. And a third aspect to mention here, since we're talking about governance, national access to global financial resources is skewed and affected by a governance system that is really designed, that was designed a long time ago, reflecting political and economic dynamics in a period that is long gone. So that brings me to my second point. What can be done globally to overcome this finance divide, this access to finance divide between developing and developed countries, since that is also so important for local governments? And this is a big topic in and of itself. I'm not going to focus too much on it. Suffice to say that there are, of course, large unmet development climate commitments by developed countries, that there are many global economic headwinds we're facing. One that is particularly affecting local governments is, of course, tight financial conditions and access to finance as well as debt. In total, we have about 36 developing countries now with very, very severe debt problems, high borrowing costs, and so forth. If a national government doesn't have access to finance, subnational government, and finance meaning lending instruments, subnational governments are unlikely to have those either. What can be done? The SG has proposed a two-pronged approach here with deep reforms of the international financial architecture, including the governance system, paired with a liquidity injection, his SDG stimulus plan with about 500 billion per year of development and climate finance mobilized through a variety of sources, including through a reform of the multilateral development bank system. There's good momentum on that, and as we approach the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development, we really are hopeful that there will be some ambitious outcome tackling these shortcomings of the international financial architecture. But let me go down to the last question, the local government level. So when we try to understand what can be done locally or nationally, because it's very interlinked, we have to look at the resources of local governments. So local governments' budgets are made up of fiscal transfers, very important resource, of own source revenues, and I would add there also own source savings, and lastly, of access to financing instruments, with the caveat that these are financing instruments in a sense they are loans, they have to be paid back. So it's very important. Sometimes one sees that in the discussion that financing and revenue instruments or saving instruments are somewhat mixed. One is a true resource, the other one has to be paid back and as a temporary resource. What can be done? There's a lot of work done in the UN system on fiscal transfers, but what we've seen in our work is, of course, that they have to be following very fair and clear distribution criteria from the national to the local government. They can't be too fragmented. They should have low transaction costs. They have to be adequate and reliable, and they should come with minimal political interference, but also strong accountability. Secondly, let me talk about own source revenues. Not the most important source of revenues for most local cities, but hopefully it will become that way. And the issue here is really that taxes and user fees are often contentious, complicated, and complex. And the biggest constraint that local governments are facing are limited authorities to actually collect those taxes. But even if these authorities are there are disincentives and difficulties in collecting them. So there's room for a lot of capacity building on collecting complicated but very, very promising taxes like property taxes. Again, there's a lot the UN system has done in this field as well. There are also revenue, savings generating sources of revenue, and these are sometimes underemphasized. Can be as simple as sponsoring the replacement of light bulbs. So if you use LED lighting in a local government, you have savings, and you can use those savings to some degree also to leverage new finance. A broader approach is our work on infrastructure asset management that we've done together with Endesa, with our partners UNCDF and UNOPS. We've really introduced a whole of local government approach, but also include the national government to bring asset management, infrastructure asset management as a new discipline into local governments, to really help local governments understand how to think about infrastructure as something that needs to be monitored, as an asset that needs to be monitored, that needs to be maintained, that needs to be tied to budgetary cycles, and to really approach it from a life cycle finance approach, not just thinking about the sort of construction or acquisition phase of things, but look at the entire life cycle. So that is also a method to generate savings at the local level, to reduce costs, and those mean additional resources in the end. And lastly, let me talk, just say a few words about borrowing. I know that is an issue that is talked about a lot. And yes, there is something like subnational borrowing in many developed countries. There is also subnational borrowing happening in developing countries, mostly perhaps more in middle income countries. But there are also constraints that are worth mentioning, and well, we have some strategies to overcome them. The biggest constraint we've seen are simply laws that prohibit subnational borrowing, and often they're there for a reason. But we've seen projects and countries where this is not well understood in the beginning, and sometimes the laws are not very clear, and there's some debate whether it is actually allowed and to what extent. So this is something to be tackled first. Limited managerial capacity because it hasn't been done before, something where the UN, I think, can help. Low creditworthiness, perhaps the most important one. So if loans are fine if you can get them, but if creditworthiness is low, you will not be able to access private capital. So under the golden rule of borrowing, where we say, only borrow to invest, and carefully considering when to borrow and for what, one can say there is room to push for more subnational borrowing in certain circumstances, but we have to be careful. If projects are self-financing, if the creditworthiness of the local government is high, then this is something to look at. In other cases, there may be instruments like concessional public loans, risk mitigation tools, local governments coming together, pooling their arrangements, although this can be also complex and hard to organize, other co-financing arrangements, financial intermediaries. We've seen some really interesting cases where we've pushed the boundaries there, and with we, I don't mean the UN, really the world. We've seen, for example, Mexico introducing a law that requires a rating for any national, subnational entity that wants to borrow, and that has really spurred a municipal borrowing market. We've seen financial intermediaries that link local governments to international finance, but all of those have to be supported somewhat and have to be involving a third party. So there's a lot to be explored, I think, in this, but we should not forget that borrowing is difficult and it can be risky. And in this environment today, it is even harder, with many developing countries having borrowing costs on the international market that are 8 times higher than those of developed countries. So to conclude, I think we have to really think of the SDG localization finance challenge at different levels. We have to start thinking about this good international financial architecture to better empower national governments to have access to development finance, so it can trickle down through fiscal transfers. And then we have to really use a variety of tools and careful analysis to push for the most appropriate financing instruments at the local level. Looking forward, I think there are a lot of events and milestone things happening that give me hope. There's the Future Summit, of course. There is the FFT4 conference. There's also the Development Cooperation Forum, where we talk about what development cooperation systems supports, how development partners can support ambitious development finance outcome, and many other things that I haven't mentioned. So I really look forward to learn from you more about what can be done, what is happening on this front, and then I would like to thank the organizers again for having me here on behalf of the FSD office. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. All really interesting points. And like you said, I'm very excited to hear about the experiences that we're bringing in from across the world in today's panel. So Let's go to our panelists. And if each of you can, within 10 minutes, give us some of your experience. Let's start with Alexander. We will start with you. Within Plan APP, you supported the response to the questionnaire on the implementation of the OECD recommendation on policy coherence for sustainable development in Portugal, as well as the management and coordination of the Portuguese 2030 National Development Plan. How is Portugal advancing in this regard? What mechanisms are in place to facilitate communication and collaboration between the different levels of government to ensure a more integrated approach to policy making?
Hello, good afternoon to you all. Thank you for this opportunity. Well, first of all, the Plan Up, it's now included in a new institutional model. It's very recent. It's from the last year, and this new institutional model is at the center of the government and intends to operationalize the 2030 agenda in the policy making. So this Councils of Ministers resolution has specifically assigned the responsibility to carry out the identification, and mapping and monitoring through PlanUp, namely of plans and other public instruments that contribute to the implementation of the SDGs and other targets. And all this with the major objective of achieving global coherence. And so this as an introduction. Well, the other the question you pose, it's kind of complex to resume, but first of all, we have already submitted in 2070 the VNR, the first VNR, and now the last year we have presented our new VNR, which we try to improve the last one, namely following all the handbook from UN, and it has some points that we are now trying to develop, and so this VNR support us to develop now the national roadmap for sustainable development, and this is now what we are trying to develop at this moment. We are trying to develop this national roadmap for sustainable development, and it's intended in this roadmap to identify solutions and response to promote the institutionalization, the effective institutionalization of the agenda, and the creation of a political ecosystem. So it's not something such a strategy. It's not planned to be developed by SDG. It's more an overall view from the view of the center of government. And at the moment we have 4 strategic objectives. I can namely just to give a brief overview. The first of one, it's improve the activity of monitoring and evaluating progress towards the SDGs, namely adapting the global targets and indicators on the plan of 2030 agenda. This because at the moment we follow the indicators from UN, but we haven't already do this adaptation that we will do after the approval of this roadmap, that is the adaptation of the global targets to our national context. The second, it's adopting a strategic framework for the sustainable development, and we intend that this strategic framework compiles all the targets that are spread in several planning instruments, and this strategic framework will be used for the future strategies and national strategies to be more coherent. So this is specifically to address the coherence. And we have the third strategic objective is dedicated exclusively for mechanisms and process of the coherence and alignment of public policies. And so in this one, in the strategic objective, we are developing the mechanisms that will be applied, for example, in the strategic objective I mentioned before. And the last one, it's to increase the levels of public ownership and knowledge of the 2030 agenda, namely in capacity in giving knowledge in this area for example in the public administration employees, and involving all the society and increasing the knowledge of the agenda in all of the society. So at this moment, this is the main process we are doing. We are also doing some other activities related with the multi-level governance, and we intend to enhance the policy coherence with that. For example, creating and mainstreaming procedures to the existing process that includes the 2030 agenda and the coherence for sustainability and development principles. We have also being developed other projects, such as identifying in each planning instrument all the targets that are related with the 2030 agenda. We are also in the process of reviewing the regulatory integrated assessment and incorporating on it the 2030 agenda. So we are developing several parallel programs, already taking a step ahead before the approval of the national strategy or national roadmap, but several improvements are being done at this moment in this area. I don't know if I answered to your question. I try to be brief, but tell me if it's another
No,
point.
you did. You did. Thank you very much. It's an incredible effort. There are a lot of things to bring together, of course. So thank you for sharing the experience from Portugal. I would like to move to Ms. Cristina Matus. As the Director of National Planning and Budget, can I ask you, how do you approach the process of resource allocation and budgeting to meet the diverse needs of the different regions or localities, and what are the main obstacles that you find?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. I cannot put the video because I don't know as my internet can be not stable. So straighting on the response for the question that you raised, I can say that the first things that we do in terms of localizing the international agenda in our national system, what we did, the first thing, it was to integrate the SDG agenda in our national planning and budgeting process from 2015 in our first in our 5-year government program 2015-2019, and then we updated it for 2020-2024. So now we are elaborating our national development program. So we are integrating the SDG agenda in this national agenda. So the national strategy, it's a reference document for all subnational government. So we have central government, we have a provincial government, and then we have municipalities and the districts. So all those levels, they must follow the priorities set it up in the national strategy, meaning that all allocation of the resource, they are following what is the priorities being placed in the national strategy of development. So there is a challenge when we are coming for the fiscal decentralization process. And then resource transference to the subnational level. There is a challenge because there is a question of criteria to allocate the resource in all sub-levels, and then following the equitable share of the resource for the all sub-levels. So all sub-levels, the provincial and the districts and the municipality, they are receiving resource from the central level. So ever in the national planning process, we have basic criteria, population, and then dimension of the area, and then the level of poverty has the main criteria that we are using for resource allocation for the subnational level. But it's still challenging because we know that there is a equality. So there is not a equality situation in all the country. So, and then the issue of dimension, the issue of the area, the issue of population, poverty, there are criteria like not well seen from the beneficiaries, because they think that maybe we can have other criteria that they can make us more equitable, or the law, or the municipality, for example, that they have low sub area, but they are more poverty, they can get more or related to the other. So we are still challenging the issue of resource allocation to the subnational level. So now we are running technical assistance from the World Bank on fiscal transfer. That they will help us to check the criteria for resource allocation for the sub-level. So there are issues of that Mr. Platts have raised it. The issue of the local level, they have their local resources that they are raising, but the issue of capacity to collect that resource, not only capacity to collect, but the capacity of management of those resources. So the issue of borrowing, so the regulations, they are not allowed them to borrow long-term resource from the banks, but they can borrow for 1 year with capacity to do this, the debt service of that borrowing. So there is still a question, because challenge, because most of the time that borrowing, it's not for investment, it's for current expenditure. So this is still a challenge. That is how we are doing. So we are trying to improve our way to allocating resource to the subnational level, but looking for the way how we are doing our planning process, we are trying to be sure that even if it's a few resources that the subnational level they are receiving, those resources, they must go to the priority actions or to the priority for the development of those local governments. So for SDGs implementation, we have set up a multi-stakeholder groups at the central level and then at the subnational level. So those multi-stakeholders groups, they are looking into how they are planning, how their priorities are being set up at the subnational level, even at the central level, in terms of SDG implementation. So we use those subnational, those multi-stakeholder groups to elaborate our first VNR that we have presented in 2020, and then we'll use it again for the second VNR that we are preparing to present next year. And then we have the issue of local VNRs that UNDESA is trying to assist us in terms of how we elaborating it, and then how they can contribute to the national VNR. So we hope that we'll strengthen those multi-stakeholders at the subnational level to work on these local VNRs in order to see how we can use it as a reference to our national VNRs. So the resources are not enough for the subnational level, but you must make sure that those are targeting the many priorities at the local level. So this is our challenging in general, the issue of the criteria for resource allocations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christina, for sharing this with us. And speaking of stakeholders, that will bring us to our next speaker, Mr. Puvendra. Within your extensive experience as a town and regional planner, you prepared, monitored, and managed the spatial development plan for the South Durban Basin. In doing so, how did you involve stakeholders, such as community groups, businesses, nonprofit organizations, in the policymaking process to enhance policy coherence and responsiveness to local needs? And how does your local government involve community members in decision-making in general when it's related to budget priorities and financial allocations? It's a bit of a long question, forgive me, but over to you.
Thank you so much, facilitator. I really appreciate the opportunity. But before I get into or delve into the specifics of Durban engaging local stakeholders in policy processes and financing, I'd just like to comment on one of the issues picked up by Daniel Platts with regards to, the change or the review of the financial architecture in funding of governments. And he spoke about the trickle down to local government. With 6 years to go to the 2030 agenda, I think trickle down is not going to be effective enough. We actually need to ensure that there's free flow of resources, be it financial or even human resources, down to the level that actually requires the most need in terms of delivery of services itself. I just thought I'll start off with that statement itself. But I'd just like to emphasize that, the significance of our collective responsibility as local authorities to respond to effective and legislative mandates, which actually requires us to engage with communities. Now, let me shed some light on how Durban has engaged with our local stakeholders. Those stakeholders could be community groups, businesses, nonprofit organizations in our policy process. This collaborative approach is not only crucial to enhancing policy coherence, but also to ensure that our initiatives are deeply rooted to the realities, but also the aspirations of the communities that we are actually engaging. So I just want to talk to three engagement opportunities, and one is we established collaborative forums. We also established community engagement initiatives, and the third one being private-public partnerships itself. Now, there's a difference in the nuance of each of these actual engagement possibilities itself. So the first one around collaborative platforms, it actually allows for the city to actively engage and play a pivotal role in creating a platform that allows for collaboration and co-creation. Be it forums, workshop, advisory committees, these were established inviting participants from all local stakeholders. Additionally, we work to establish a coordinated stakeholders forum across the municipalities. These forums actually aim to engage with citizens on various municipal matters with a clearly defined roles and responsibilities, but it is outlined in our collaborative efforts itself. The second one is around engagement. Now, there's a big difference between collaboration and engagement, because our engagement with our community goes beyond mere tokenism. We actively seek input from our local communities around or through town hall meetings, focus group discussions, participatory planning sessions. At the onset of each political term, we have a 10-person ward committee that is chaired by the elected ward councillor. This committee is established to represent the collective voice of the ward, engaging with residents to develop what we call a community-based plan, which informs our budgeting and our planning processes, including policy as well. This bottom-up approach ensures that our policies are actually more reflective of the unique needs of each of our communities based in the actual wards itself. From a private-public partnership perspective, we also recognize that business play a vital role in local development itself. So we actively engage private-public partnerships itself. These partnerships are not only for economic growth, but also play a role in policy making itself. Chairperson, I'm actually quite glad to say that South Africa has a very progressive PPP framework, which actually facilitates successful collaboration. From an eThekwini perspective, there's been actively engaging our PP initiatives to deliver quality urban environments. Such examples being a multi-purpose node called Bridge City in the north of the city, which actually includes a newly established magistrates court, a state-of-the-art regional hospital, coupled with retail and entertainment opportunities, but further supported with a multimodal transport hub itself. Other examples include King Shaka Erytropolis, our Dubai trade port, but also being a port city, we've significantly worked with our private sector to ensure that they all contribute to the logistics value chain in terms of building, warehousing, and logistics itself. The city has also engaged with big business to localize the SDGs. One such example is that we're working with the South African breweries to look at a road and pedestrian safety program itself. This partnership creates a learner transport program for scholars, or a safe learner transport program for scholars in our city itself. We're happy to say that we've also extended this partnership to our neighboring countries as well. A program that we're further seeking to establish with the brewery is how to reduce its potable water, or the use of potable water, and thereby assisting the municipality to secure affordable, reliable, quality, and quantity of potable water, which will also assist us in our water-related SDGs itself. We merely don't do public participation for tokenism, but really it's really about making an inclusive policy and involving stakeholders. But involving stakeholders for what? It's one is to ensure that we have policy coherence. The inclusion of diverse perspectives ensures that policies are comprehensive and address a spectrum of needs and challenges itself. This coherence is vital in the successful implementation and sustainability of our development initiatives. Also, we ensure that there is greater local relevance. Local stakeholders bring a very nuanced understanding of community dynamics. Their involvement ensures our initiatives are tailored to unique characteristics and the needs of each of the neighborhood, prompting relevance, but also more so acceptance itself. Also, we take a look at community ownership. Inclusive policy making fosters a sense of ownership amongst the local stakeholders. When communities actively contribute to decision making, there's a greater likelihood of successful implementation, as well as residents feel that they're part of the investment as well as the outcomes itself. On the second point around how do we actively involve stakeholders in the discussion or the decision-making processes, I'll cover 7 key points itself. One is that we have public consultation forums as well as opportunities for forums itself. So the fundamental pillar of our engagement strategy is to organize public consultation, forums, town hall meetings, etc. This forms a vital platform for community members to express their opinions, but also contribute to the decision-making process itself. Our town hall meetings are not just around the budget. It includes city strategy and monitoring and evaluation as well. So the residents are enabled to actually get a complete picture of planning, budgeting, implementation, as well as monitoring and evaluation, and what roles they can play in each of those processes itself. Now, whilst we have town hall meetings, etc., we do need to understand that there are groups that actually require specific engagement itself. So we do have targeted engagement For example, traditional leadership, as well as people with disabilities, we have dedicated sessions with these groups to enable a process of civic engagement so that there is a more inclusive and representative decision-making process itself. We've also used online platforms and emails. COVID has taught us to embrace technology in terms of our strategy for engagement, leveraging social media, emails, online platforms, etc., allow us to engage with a wider community itself. I spoke about our award committees early on. Really, they represent the diverse interests and perspectives of our community itself. But the output of that ward committee is a community-based plan. And central to the approach of our municipality is ensuring that we have a well-established community-based planning program, which actually talks to the budgeting, the planning, as well as the spatial planning processes within the municipality. The last 2 points, and I think are actually quite important as well, if you're looking at engaging with communities around budgeting, we need to ensure that we're financially transparent. Transparency is a cornerstone of our governance philosophy. We have to build trust, and we're committed to providing accessible information around budget allocation, where we spend the budget, but also our financial plans to our residents itself. Through our residential websites, through our community engagement, through our community collaborations itself, we provide community members with easy access to the information. Additionally, we also produce what we call a budget process plan, which actually details the process of developing the budget, but also allows residents to comprehend the budget process and can make informed contributions to the actual process itself. And the last point that I actually wanted to raise as well is from an educational perspective. We do have to acknowledge the importance of informed communities. Our city conducts educational campaigns throughout the ward or the community-based planning processes. These initiatives highlight or enlighten residents around budgetary processes, our financial constraints, the implication of different budget priorities. We believe that through an educated community is an empowered community and is capable of making contributions to the decision-making process itself. Chairperson, I've did allude to quite a lot of issues and challenges itself, but we need to recognize the dynamic nature of these practices in terms of community participation and engagement. And we need to actively seek to engage with our stakeholders so that they can play a crucial role in shaping the futures of our community. Through collaboration, transparency, and inclusivity, we can build a resilient and prosperous city that actually reflects the aspiration and the needs of the resident. Chairperson, let me leave my my input there, and I'm glad to take any questions, etc., as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, you describe a very dynamic, engaged community, which I wish all cities would actually be able to participate in decision making with all the great platforms that you have shared with us. And I'm sure there will be a round of questions, of course, at the end of our of getting the first thoughts from our panelists. So we go to our next panelist, Mr. Julio Saguir, Secretary of Public Management and Planning Province of Tucumán, Argentina. Mr. Saguir, you have a long experience in public policies and planning. Could you share with us an example of how policy coherence has enhanced efficiency and effectiveness in existing policies? I see you have a presentation, so over to you, sir.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'll try to use my minutes for as best as I can. I'm going to share with you an experience from our province on planning and coordinating public policies the best we can within the framework of SDGs. We are talking about a province that is in Argentina. It's a very small province called Tucumán. Argentina is a federation. We have been working from 2005. We started working with the Millennium Development Objectives that you well know. And in 2016, we adopted the SDGs as our framework for working in planning, in government planning in the country. Let me do this better. I think that that's better. This is our website where you can see all that I'm going to share with you. We have first started to set SDG targets. We have found 45 indicators that allowed us to adapt the targets to our province. Okay, so for all SDGs, we have found 45 indicators that allow us to set for 2030 precise quantitative targets. Okay, what we have done after that? After that, we decided to identify all policies or programs or actions, public policies that our ministries and areas of government were using. Okay, programs or policies that all our ministries and secretaries have been implementing. As there you can see on the one side, on the columns, you can see all the ministries, and then on the sides, the SDGs. Okay, so we have come to identify almost 700 programs or policies that could be related. This is important for what I'm going to show now. So each program was after we identify them in that precise ministry or secretary, we linked that program to 1, 2, or 3 SDGs that could be related. And we got this. We got that for, you can see there the cake, okay? And then we got that, for example, for SDGs.
I'm very, very, very sorry, Mr. Sagir. I think we don't see the correct slide. We need to move to the presentation.
Oh, you are not watching the...
We are on the page with background information. That's the slide that we have. I think you've moved further than that. Ah, now it's moving. Thank you. We're on provincial programs and policies linked to SDGs.
You are watching the cake that says SDG Matrix Tucumán?
Yes, right now we're on the right slide. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. So once we have identified the programs and made the relation with SDGs, we got this. We got that for each SDGs, how many programs from all over the government, okay? So from SDG number 1, okay, we got 37 policies. So from different areas of government. So that was very strong, okay, for allowing us to see that from different areas of government, we were contributing to one SDGs and even more, to one target or to another target. Then we came also to identify the laws from the legislature that have been signed, okay, in the last 10 years that are also a legal framework for those SDGs. And finally, we also came out with what the research science in our province were doing. When I say science, I mean projects from our universities or our research institutes that were related to each target and SDGs. We came to identify 900 scientific projects that we related in the same way, okay? So at the end, we got something like this. Well, this is our website, okay, where we organize all the work. There you can see what we did with the targets, okay. You go to the page and you can see SDG number 1, end of poverty, and how we precise it for Tucumán. And we got into, and you can see how we said, well, for 2030, we are going to get to that point, etc., etc., etc. Then we go to the matrix, and what we finally did after the relation that I showed you before, you can see government initiatives, provincial laws, lines of investigation. We also, but that we haven't got so far yet. We did something similar with non-governmental institutions and companies, okay? And this is what you finally have in the matrix. You get the goal, you get the precise goal, and see, you can see company, non-governmental institution, executive power, legislative power, and you go and you find this. You see, if you click on executive power, then you have all these programs that I have been telling you, all the programs from different ministries, secretaries, and areas of government. This is very strong. This is very strong because you can see the possibility of coordinating, okay, between areas, which is finally, you know, one of the most important things for SDGs, because it shows us that SDGs cannot be fulfilled only from one area of government. Even the SDGs being related to education or health, okay, will not only be fulfilled from the actions that come from those ministries. Different ministries are doing things that can have an impact on the other, on different SDGs. And that's just to show what you will find in the description of each program, and I hope that I made myself explicit. Finally, we have also done the following work, which is different to what I have shown you so far. It's like a laboratory experience. Using a UNICEF methodology for relating budget with childhood expenditure, we have used that methodology to identify how budget was related to SDGs. And we took 3 years of our provincial budget and we made that relation. And we came out with these results, okay? Now we have this, we finished this work last year, and now that we have this correlation, I'm trying to convince the Ministry of Finance that this is a good work and that he can organize also the provincial budget to our SDGs. There's a period of convincing my colleague that is a good work, okay? So this is what I had to show you from Tucumán, okay? I'm trying to see how I'll get out from here.
Yeah, you stopped sharing the screen. It's good now. And we still see you, so I think we're good. This is extremely impressive work, very, very interesting. So I'm sure there will be also a lot of questions. I want to encourage everyone in the session, if you have any questions for our panelists, please write them in the chat, and we'll make sure to bring them in the discussion session at the end of this round of speakers from the panel.
Thank you,
Nagua. Thank you very much, Mr. Sagir. I'd like to bring in an academic perspective now. So, Ms. Amalinda, can we ask you how the research developed by academia influences policymaking processes, and what are the challenges that you've encountered in doing so?
Thank you so much, Nagia. Can you hear me well?
Yes, clearly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and to listen to many stories from all over the world. And your question is very important from the academia point of view. Particularly, I will contextualize that with Indonesia experience. As you know, perhaps you might all know that Indonesia is a big country. We have 270 plus million population. 33 provinces and more than 500 districts and cities. So involvement of academia is very, very urgent and important in the Indonesian context and I'm sure it's also very important in other countries too, but specifically to Indonesia case, local government as well as national government, managing these big countries requires more people to collaborate, basically, and including the academia. And academia can involve in so many levels. For instance, conducting research and giving policy recommendation both for the national government and local government, as well as to evaluate, what's the implementation so far concerning the localization of SDGs, for instance. So also, many of my colleagues been part of this multi-stakeholders forum, actively engaged in contributing to local government and national government on particular issues. For instance, how, gender inequality or gender equality or gender participation in the policy process, including in the development planning, starting from the village level that we have, go up to the district level, provincial level, and at the national level. They're all involved in the contributing in this process, evaluating to what extent this deliberative forum on development planning has been inclusive as one of the SDGs principle, to be inclusive and to include more citizens, including gender, including women, young people, disabilities, right? So that's why if you talk about the contribution of the academia, they are really concentrating in critical issues, including this gender, disabilities group, young people, to get involved in the development planning, for instance. But there are also academia who have been really critical about what has been done so far in terms of SDGs localization or SDGs implementations, because as I mentioned before, Indonesia is a big country. It's been a big struggle to really put the policy coherence at place. Coherence for the Indonesian context can mean two things: horizontally, among sectors, and vertically among level of a government. So here, academia also not just being critical, but also contributing and part of the so-called National Action Program for the SDGs, as well as regional action plan that government has institutionalized through its presidential decree. So many of the academia get involved, both being inside the government and outside the government. Mostly the one that outside the government usually collaborate with civil society organizations, trying to engage, trying to contribute, trying to be critical in a good way on how SDGs issues being implemented, how SDGs localizations run, and what sort of things that still need to be done from the perspective of outsider. So we have this insider and outsiders. But I think despite this being inside and being outside the government, I think to my knowledge, it's been quite strengthening each other. We are all wants to have this making sure that SDGs principle, being implemented at the national and local government, as well as I think our government has this in terms of financial already frame the financial in terms of inclusivity. So the thing is we need to make sure that this is not just a buzzword or slogan that not really implemented at the local level. So there's been a lot of studies. There's been a lot of critical view from the academia on what's the best to make sure that SDGs are implemented at both national and local level, because there are many critical issues too here, including to what extent women participation, young people participation in rich area, for instance. What I mean by rich area is, in terms of extractive sectors or mining or that, because we know that in many areas like this, they have been really minimized or marginalized and not really included in the whole process of policy making, including to make sure that the SDGs principles are at place. Also, the ADAT or the indigenous group who also get benefit from the development find it really difficult to influence development planning. So that's sort of a also critical point of view that have been discussed in public. We're going to have our election next month in 2 weeks, 14th of February, and now all of the development issues become really critical among the presidential candidate, to really making sure that after, do you offer something about this problem in terms of in the framing of SDGs. So we are now in really long debate. This heated debate now over the past 5 weeks to make sure that our presidential candidate, are really concerned or concerned about or prioritize people, marginal group like women, young people, and also disability and indigenous group, and never been left behind. So that's really important for the Indonesia and the role of the academia in making sure that all are at place. I guess that's from my point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Of course, all the sectors are extremely important to make this happen, and financing has been a key thread through all of this. So matching the opportunities brings us to Sami, and I want to start by saying I hope you feel better and you overcome your influenza soon. So my understanding is that Business Tampere matches opportunities and partnerships in the Tampere region in Finland. Is that correct? So
Yes.
could you give us an example of how you do that? What are the key challenges, especially in connecting private and public sector?
Yes. So the Business Tampere is kind of like a regional development agency. So it operates as a private company, but it's publicly owned. So it's owned by the city of Tampere. And that's because it gives us more flexibility to operate on the field. And our main role is to actually connect, as just mentioned, different stakeholders together and achieve, of course, the SDG policies, economic development of the area. And linked to this, what has been discussed in Tampere, we also did this VLR report in 22, and basically how we did it is just give you kind of quick background information on it. So we did it like the report in a way that we went through every single SDG, and we outlined the perspective, what is happening on a global level, what's happening on a national level in Finland, and what's happening in Tampere. And then when we're looking at what's happening in Tampere in different SDGs, and then we connected that on the even like an industry, citizens, feedback, what's being gathered, and we have then those several called like a development programs, which are then driven together by public and private sector. So in all the activities, we engage constantly feedback from the companies, feedback from the school, academia, and as well the citizens when doing the regional development projects. And by that, we then also this VLR report, we were able to combine like basically the first-hand feedback from the field. So we're able to make it like very concrete, because what I see as one issue, it's another thing to do a policy, but it's another thing to implement it locally in a way that it's something tangible and concrete and measurable. So we combine it through these development programs, which are called, for example, 5-star city center is one that we call as a program. And the idea for that is like how we are turning the city center more like attractive, more sustainable, more carbon neutral, these type of things. And that's done then together with, of course, with the private sector as well, because as the way how we see it here, like in Zambia, it's like public sector plays a crucial role. There's no denying on that. But if we are looking about, if we want to move forward towards different like SDGs, we need innovations. We need private sector for that, because the public sector is not the one who is doing the innovations. So that's why it's very important that we bring on the academia and the private sector. That's what the new ideas come from. And the public sector works as a platform where they can try different things, bring them on using as test beds, bring them on, and by that help to kind of achieve the goals that are mentioned. And then, of course, under each goal, there is certain kind of a measurable criteria, which is very crucial, because this is something which is also sometimes forgotten as well, that you need to set up some very clear metrics that you follow. Otherwise, you never can tell for sure whether you reach your goals or not. So then when each of these set up like an SDG, what we mentioned in this volunteer local report, so there's different metrics over there that we then also follow. That's basically, I would say, in a nutshell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have a few minutes to go for this session, and whoever has the flexibility to stay on for a few more, that would be very much appreciated, because we have a whole lot of questions coming in on the chat. So I also invite our participants to join the conversation, but I will start with a question for Mr. Povendra Akia. Patterson Gontner asks you, they say, in my experience, community-based plans often identify a long list of needs that far exceed budget capacity for implementation. How does the budget prioritize these needs and reconcile them with the needs of other communities and those identified by higher levels of government?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. A very important question is, whilst we do community engagement and collaboration, we need to create an understanding that community needs need to fit within a specific budget and time frame, etc. So what we do is, it is one of the tools that we take into our strategic planning processes. For example, we look at community-based access modeling. Communities will always request a police station, a post office, a library, etc. in their ward. However, in terms of planning standards and norms, we have an access model which actually looks at these facilities within the ward and the region basis itself. So therefore, we put these community needs through those technical processes, which are addressed by various line departments, and then address the community needs. We then take those back together with the evidence of those planning processes itself and engage with the community. So in the second year of review, they are far more empowered to understand exactly what the needs are. So when we do the review of the community-based plan in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, they have an understanding of community access needs, etc. So that is how we actually been able to marry ward priorities with the deliverables based on planning norms and standards. And those norms and priorities that make it through the norms and standards then get featured into a budget process. Now, we also understand that it cannot be budgeted within year 1. So there's a possibility that it be budgeted in year 3, 4, or 5, and that is how you actually have to engage as well. As long as you engage with community, you say that, listen, these are the priorities, these are how I can address it and when I can address it, and these are the reasons I cannot address certain ones as well. For priorities that are national and province, we have a separate process where we actually take that through what we call district development model clusters, which look at provincial and national mandates in terms of delivery. Yeah, thank you. Let me stop there. Others I can continue going on and on, but I'll give others a chance as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, there are a number of questions addressed to you, so I will come back to you, but I wanted to ask if any of the other panelists would also like to address this particular point of reconciling the budget priorities with the needs of the community, if you have had to deal with this in your work. Christina, please come in.
Okay. Yes, this is the challenge because the need of the community are so much, and so this exercise of looking for the priorities and beside the priorities, what the budget can afford, and then the issue of planning for not the 1 year but for next year. So this is the exercise that is done. At least following what Alessandro have said, is the same exercise that we are doing. So those multi-stakeholders groups, they are very important leading the process because they must make sure that what is planning. It's being planning for the year budgeting. It's following the needs of the population. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there are no other comments from our panelists, there's a question for Amalinda. Someone is asking how planning at the local level is integrated into the planning at the national level. Muazzam Ali Janjua is asking you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the questions. Yes, it's a very important and interesting question for the Indonesian context with so big. I mean, and then, with so many local government level, as well as in terms of numbers. Excuse me. So usually the national government has set up a main principle of what we call like a 5-year development planning document, and the one at the local level needs to refer to that the national document for the development planning. So by having that a bit of top-down process, the local level needs to always in line with the national development planning. And of course, it's not always work, right? So usually they have this so-called the monitoring agency at the national level that try to make sure that all kind of regulation or institutional product at the local level in line with the national one. Although it doesn't always work. For instance, in one of the area in the West Java, there's been a trend of having this quite exclusive local bylaw that tend to discriminate minority groups, particularly because it's a domination of Muslim populations, and they kind of because it's very populist. It's, for the election, it's very how do you say that? It's easy to mobilize voters. It's easy to get sympathy from the majority of the population. So, but then later on, there's been a lot of critical view and street demonstrations to this type of discrimination local bylaw, and also the local national government tried to do something about it, and then they can, give some kind of sanctions to the local government. So it's really quite, in one way, you really want to give some freedom principle of a national government, like this basic principle of Indonesian government, for instance, not discriminating minority group. So that's quite the tension between you want to give some freedom to the local government, but at the same time you also need to stick to the way our constitution values that state in our constitution. But by regulations, we always have these national regulations that local government needs to integrate the planning to the national document. I think that I hope that answered the questions.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm just noting that it is 4:30, and I thank you all if you have a few more minutes to spare because we still have questions coming in. There is a question addressed to you, Alexander, from Robert Papa. He says, one of the ways we're leveraging on SDG financing at the local level, that is Busia County in Kenya, is by incentivizing private sector to invest in markets that work for SDGs, such as education, healthcare, and access to water and sanitation. We focus on improving the ease of doing business. And he is asking you, what is your take on this?
Thank you for the question. On this regard, and since I developed my work on the center of government, what we have at the moment regarding the SDGs is the state budget, for example, of the last year. It was circulated among the different entities, a survey to identify the amounts of expenditures regarding to each SDG. And so this process of compiling this information was developed in coordination with PLANUP and the general direction of the budgeting, and we have identified for this first survey which are the SDGs that have more amount in that part. Regarding the at the local level, in Portugal we have, for example, different instruments that come from the European Commission. We have the Portugal 2030 Partnership Agreement, and this one established the major strategic objectives and programming for this application of funds. So we have, for example, 4 thematic programs, 7 regional programs that applies for the different regions of Portugal. And if you dive more, this just to give a general overview, and if you dive more for municipalities, they are directly financed by the state through the financial regimes of local authorities and intermunicipal entities. And for example, it has for different types of expenditures. You have a general subsidy that are determined by the final balance fund that come from taxes. You have other that come from the municipal social fund, other variable participation also from taxes, but all this comes from are financed by the state. Regarding the private sector to invest, that depends. We have some studies and the government try to promote that the different private companies invest on the SDGs, but at the moment, what the state are doing, but this is my opinion, because what I have more deep knowledge is what is done, for example, in the state of budget. All the other activities and promoting the investment, it's done through awareness, and also some universities in Portugal dedicate exclusively for the company sustainability and promoting the SDGs, and so that the private companies can promote their own sustainability and so contribute for the SDGs. I don't know if I answered the best way for the question, or if you want
Yes,
some other. Okay, thank
No,
you.
this is wonderful. Thank you very much. There are a few other questions on the chat. There are also some of the participants have shared resources and links for everyone to browse through, and I encourage you all to do so. There is a response from Daniel to Puvandra's comment. So I hope that you've noticed that. So I encourage you all to look at the chat and respond to any specific questions. And I just want to thank you very much for your time, for joining us today for this incredible discussion. As part of the new initiative of the MLG for SDGs, this will be a discussion that will hopefully be featured in a lot of the coming forums, and I look forward to seeing you in these events again. Thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you for the participants for being with us today. And goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.